I felt I was competing with men who didn't have the same childcare responsibilities I had. I also felt kind of being dark-skinned, brown-skinned was a little bit of a disadvantage because I didn't come from a academic background, so I didn't have that support or that kind of any role models. So I had to find role models. So it was challenging, yeah.
I think one issue which occurs, especially in computer science, maybe, is that you walk into a meeting or a seminar or something, and you are the only woman in there, and it feels a bit bizarre. No one says anything, and I'm always the one who asks questions, and because I trust my colleagues very much, and I think that's fine. But there's always that one moment that you walk in and you sit down and you look around, and you're the only woman in there. And yesterday I went to a meeting to an interview talk, and at least our head of department is female, which is really good. And there was one PhD student who was female and me, and there were about 20 men in there. And yeah, it's odd.
So not myself personally, but I do know of people where that has been a reality, even things like attending conferences and those kinds of things. Unless there is kind of funding that is kind of outlined specifically for these things are very expensive and mean that you don't get to do the fullness of your research course or your research degree. Because those kinds of things, networking is important, but also hearing about other research that is going on kind of across the country, across the world, across the sector, all those things help to, I feel like, make you a better researcher, make you have a broader understanding of the area of interest. I think in the same way that most organisations will have some kind of funding allocated for staff to pursue things like professional development, I think it's the same thing, because equally it's allowing that individual to progress and develop and learn more about their area. So, these things should be funded, definitely.
There have been kind of programmes that have been, there are different funding programmes. So I think that is starting to emerge, but I think there's a real issue about saying, if you're, say, a PhD student or a master's student, saying because you're brown or black, you get a travel grant, you can apply for a travel grant, whereas someone who's not fit that category doesn't. I think there's also the concern to treat everyone equally. So I think it's difficult, but certainly that we have at Royal Holloway last year, after the George Floyd killing, we did put together a black studentship, PhD studentship. So, and we have a student now, a black student doing her PhD. She's just going into second year. She's a really excellent student. So that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for George Floyd. However much people are motivated to treat everyone equally, we know there is unconscious bias, there is research to support that. Obviously people are a lot more aware of it now, and there is training to address that. But I think there is this problem that people haven't got a good understanding of some of the issues and challenges someone of colour might face, as opposed to someone who comes from a privileged background of non-colour or white. I come from a working class background, I'm brown, so there's also the kind of social class, lack of social class diversity. And I think there is more awareness, but I think there's definitely unconscious bias in academia. I've seen it on interviewing panels. I haven't been on any interviewing panels recently, but I have seen it over the years, especially in my previous job where I lived in Scotland and Aberdeen, and there's really a lack of diversity there. There's a bit more diversity here in London, but yeah, so that there is, and people are motivated to tackle it, but there is definitely a lack of role models.
Depends. I think the first thing that's kind of important is about the culture of the place, because whilst you can get, schemes like that might help initially to get students or individuals from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic backgrounds into an organisation, or a research group, for example, the key thing is actually keeping them there. And if there isn't a culture that encourages diversity, or that reflects that diversity is important, I don't think it will make a difference. So I think the first thing is about what is the culture of the place? Is diversity something that we actually actively support, as opposed to it being a tick box exercise and, okay, we realize we have an issue here, and so let's hire more students or individuals from these backgrounds. But I think the first step needs to be, assessing the initial workplace first.
I think initiatives which help expose young scientists to conferences and to network with each other is very important. I think building networks is very good, but there's also the other side of it. There's the reaction to it. So several people say, well, why should it be for women only? Why are there initiatives? And I've had discussions with male colleagues who have this implicit, not just implicit, but explicit, that women have it easier to get an internship. And they say, well, if you to a male student who didn't get internship, they would say yes, but they would prefer it if you were, they would give it to you if you were, a minority of some kind, and it creates resentment. But I did have to look through the laws and say that, if you advertised an internship to be a general one, you cannot discriminate. It would be illegal to then give preference to a female candidate or a Black candidate or someone. But you can have special initiatives which are targeted to women. So you can advertise, like we do for the scholarship, that it is a scholarship for women. But if we instead had advertised, we have scholarships for conferences, and men and women applied, and we only gave it to women, that would be illegal. Most people are not aware that there is this distinction. Which is made a bit worse because on the one hand, there's also the imposter syndrome, and on the other hand, the expectation you have to do even more to succeed so that you get over the perception that you got an opportunity for being female. I think put yourself out there. Not be shy. Don't be shy, but take the opportunities which come. And I think, as I mentioned, the imposter syndrome word, because I think that's quite important, and especially female students find that a lot. They say women only apply for a job if they satisfy all the requirements, and men apply for a job even if they satisfy half of the requirements, and the men end up getting the job.